Welcome to Jazz Piano Skills. I'm Dr. Bob Lawrence. It's time to discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Here we are, the start of a new month, the month of May. It's hard to believe that we are a third of the way through a new year and have already explored improvisation patterns for the keys of C, F, B flat, and E flat. And as you know, the patterns are designed to help us get comfortable with the frequent shifting of our right hand, which is needed when improvising. Of course, in order to be successful with the constant shifting of our right hand, we need to be very much aware of our fingerings. So with every month and every new key, we are challenged with patterns and fingerings for each of the primary sounds of music: major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished, plus the four traditional altered dominant sounds as well: sharp 11, flat 13, flat 9, flat 13, and the fully altered sound: flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5. In addition to all of that, we then take a week out of each month to assess the fruits of our labor by studying a classic bebop tune. And in doing so, we validate the importance of good fingerings that allow us to easily and accurately shift our right hand when playing bebop heads, bebop melodies, and while improvising. Needless to say, it's pretty intense work, right? So much so that if you are not truly serious about wanting to discover, learn, and play jazz piano, you'll move on to another podcast, you'll move on to another site, another program, another YouTube video, a popular book, and so on, in hopes of finding something much easier than jazz piano skills. Something much easier that will hopefully do the trick for you. To those of you who fall into this category, I wish you all the best with your jazz journey. And for those of you who are hunkering down and getting down to business, staying the course and putting in the hard work and study, I want to say congratulations. Your payday is coming very soon. Now, with all of that being said, you regular listeners know, you true DLPers. A DLPer, of course, is one who is serious about their journey, their quest to discover, learn, and play jazz piano. I just came up with that. Anyway, for you true DLPers, you know that I like to give you all a reprieve between keys, right? To give you time to digest the patterns and fingerings of the current key before moving on to a new key. And I typically do this by inviting a guest to join me on Jazz Piano Skills, which of course I will continue to do. However, today, I thought I would take this break between keys to introduce you to a new Jazz Piano Skills segment that I am officially launching today. My new segment is called the JPS Lecture Series. The idea is this: I may do a solo lecture like I will be doing today, or a lecture that includes a guest panel, several folks. Either way, a lecture series episode will explore a specific jazz topic in depth. The idea is that I want to give you a seat at the table with the best jazz educators in the world, where the discussion is centered around a specific topic and essential jazz piano skills. Needless to say, I am extremely pumped about the JPS Lecture Series, and I hope you are too. So I thought I would kick things off today with a lecture titled Jazz Improvisation Practice Mistakes. Jazz educators spend a lot of time talking about what you should be doing to improve your jazz piano skills. However, we rarely discuss what you should not be doing. So today, you get to kick back, listen, and enjoy my thoughts, insights, and experiences as a lifelong jazz student and professional jazz educator about mistakes you want to avoid when practicing jazz. So you're going to discover 3 huge mistakes that you want to avoid when practicing jazz improvisation. You're going to learn how to think about practicing jazz improvisation formulaically. And you are going to play essential exercises that will help you develop improvisational skills the right way. So as I always like to say, regardless of where you are in your jazz journey, a beginner, an intermediate player, an advanced player, or even if you consider yourself a seasoned and experienced professional, you're going to find this Jazz Piano Skills podcast lesson exploring jazz improvisation practice mistakes to be very beneficial. But before we dig in, I want to, as I always do, welcome first-time listeners to Jazz Piano Skills. And if you are indeed a new listener, if you are new to the Jazz Piano Skills podcast, if you're new to Jazz Piano Skills, I want to personally invite you to become a Jazz Piano Skills member. There are various membership plans to choose from, so take a moment when you have a few minutes free to check out Jazz Piano Skills to learn more about all of the perks of each of the membership plans. There are educational weekly podcast packets, sequential jazz piano online piano curriculum, which is loaded with comprehensive courses. There are online weekly master classes, online interactive fake book. There's a private Jazz Piano Skills community, which hosts a variety of engaging forums. There's unlimited private, personal, and professional educational support as well. All of these perks waiting for you to help you discover, learn, and play jazz piano. So when you have a moment, visit JazzPianoSkills.com, check it all out, and of course, become a member. Once you're there, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate. Feel free to contact me, reach out to me. I'm always happy to spend some time with you, answer any questions that you may have, and help you in any way that I can. Okay, let's discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Let's have some fun with jazz improvisation practice mistakes. Okay, there are several mistakes that the beginning jazz pianist makes when embracing the challenge of developing improvisational skills. The mistakes, of course, range from simply not investing enough practice time to overthinking the entire process and trying to do way too much. And when I say trying to do too much, I mean trying to do way too much every time they sit down at the piano to practice. You know, in my 3+ decades of teaching professionally, I can honestly say that every student I have had the privilege to help has embarked upon their journey with the sincerest of intentions and the utmost optimism. However, if the big mistakes they are about to make are not immediately addressed and rectified, then their good intentions and optimism will quickly wane. Now, you may be asking, how in the world do you know the mistakes they are about to make before they make them? Well, because every single student, and I mean that literally, every student makes these critical mistakes. My job, as it is for every jazz educator, is to address these common mistakes as quickly as possible so that the student can make the necessary adjustments and continue to experience forward motion, continue to experience growth, right? Continue to experience progress. So today, I am going to address 3 mistakes that everyone, including you, make when working on developing improvisational skills. Additionally, I will, of course, suggest some exercises to practice that will help you circumvent these critical mistakes. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 1. Every beginning jazz improviser wrestles with trying to play melodies. Let me say that again. Every beginning jazz improviser wrestles with trying to play melody. That's right, melody. So if you are trying to think of a melody to play when improvising, you are already off track. Now, this may sound strange to you since we all think of jazz improvisation as our ability to create melodies on the fly. And indeed, it is. However, the ability to spontaneously compose, to improvise, is the byproduct of successfully practicing harmony and rhythm. Let me say that again as well. The ability to spontaneously compose, to improvise, is the byproduct of successfully practicing harmony and rhythm. So if you are trying to develop your improvisational skills by focusing on melody before having an operational command, a functional command of harmony and rhythm, then you have the cart ahead of the horse. You're starting at the end of the process instead of the beginning, which is never a good idea. So let's talk about harmony first. How well do you know your chords? Can you easily spell them from the root to the 7th of the sound for all 12 major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished chords, 60 in total? Can you spell them from the root to the 7th? Can you spell them in their inverted positions as well? I call these 60 chords the primary sounds of music. Now, not only is your ability to spell them vitally important, but you also want to be able to see them as well. And not only spell them and see them in root position, right? But also spell them and see them in their inverted shapes. Now, I start every new jazz piano student with these shapes and sounds because they are the harmonic foundation of music. In fact, they are the foundation of music. Without a conceptual and physical command of this foundation, these 60 harmonic structures, you are going nowhere with your playing. I cannot be any more truthful than that. If you do not have a command of the 60 harmonic structures, 12 major, 12 dominant, 12 minor, 12 half diminished, 12 diminished chords in root position and inversions, you are going nowhere. There's not a YouTube video that you can watch that's going to circumvent this truth. There's not a book you're going to read that's going to circumvent this truth. There's not a podcast that you're going to listen to that's going to circumvent this truth. There's not a shortcut. I hate to break it to you. No shortcut. These 60 chords must be under your fingers, in your ears, and sorted out conceptually in your mind. I had a teacher literally, he would greet me at the front door. Before I could even get to the front door, he would be standing at the front door, shouting to me as I'm walking up the sidewalk through his screen door. He would say, "A half diminished." And he wanted me to literally, as quickly as he said the chord name, A half diminished, he wanted me to say A, C, E flat, G. And if I hesitated 1 second, if I said like A, C, he would yell, "You do not know it." B flat minor 7. I'd go a B flat, D, D. You do not know it. C diminished. C, E flat. You do not know it. I would go, holy smokes. I used to say, "Listen, can you give me a second, please?" And he'd say, "Well, spell Bob." Yeah, right? And he would say, "Look, you have to be able to spell these chords as easily as you spell your name." So he used to drill me every single lesson the same way. And I remember one day, I was walking up the sidewalk and he'd yell, "F sharp dominant 7. I'd say F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E. He'd say D minor 7. I go D, F, A, C. He would say A flat dominant 7. I'd say A flat, C, E flat, G flat. And he must have rattled off at least a dozen chord names, and I would rattle right back at him. I'd rattle off the spelling. And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, "You know them." And I said, "Yes, I do." So my whole point is you have to know them in the very same way. When I start a new jazz piano student with learning the primary sounds of music, the 60 chords in root and inverted positions, I explain to them that this is really an improvisation exercise. I tell them this because it is these shapes, these sounds, that they will use to begin developing melodies when improvising. Now, I say this to every student, and I know for a fact it goes in one ear and out the other, because they have absolutely no idea how these harmonic shapes could possibly be used to improvise. So when I tell them this musical truth, it's a pleasant exchange between the two of us, with affirming up and down head nods, accompanied with warm smiles. But I know it is quickly forgotten. But that's okay, because I will continue to reinforce this musical fact over and over and over again until one day they truly discover that they actually have to thoroughly know and be able to play the 60 chords in root position in 3 inverted shapes if they have hopes of ever improvising. Now, let's talk about rhythm. The piano is a rhythm instrument that should be played percussively. That is, if you want your piano music to be exciting, emotional, and expressive, right? So rhythm should be something you focus on developing every time you sit down to practice. Rhythm is, without question, the most challenging skill for most people to develop, especially adults. And the reason for this is that adults are way too uptight. They just simply are. Something has happened to us throughout our lifetime, over the years, that makes us emotionally stiff. I guess it's the battles of day-to-day living that make us this way, that make us stiff, make us on guard, make us guard our emotions, make us protect our feelings, and show little emotion, if ever. I get it, right? But unfortunately, we need to be relaxed, not stiff, expressive, and emotional to play rhythm. So for all of you listening who are stiff, emotionless, unfeeling, then I have great news for you. The study of jazz piano is going to be great therapy. Who knew? Who knew? Okay, so to begin playing rhythm, you have to begin to sing. Now, I'm not talking about the type of singing where you are producing a pretty sound and matching pitch, right? We're not trying to be Luciano Pavarotti here. We're not studying voice. The singing that I am talking about is more like a moan or a groan that you do internally, underneath your breath, if you will, that produces emotion, feelings, and expression. We call this rhythm. Now, with that being said, you want to make sure that you are moaning or groaning real rhythms and not just grunting to grunt, right? Real rhythms, right? Now, real rhythms are the opposite of just poking around on the keys trying to simulate rhythm, right? Real rhythms can be transcribed. In other words, someone would be able to actually musically notate what you just played, right? So let me give you an analogy. When I was a little boy, now I do not know why I remember this, but it's funny how we remember certain things in our childhood. But I remember when I was just a little guy, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old, somewhere in there, I had this fascination with cursive writing. I would see my parents and aunts and uncles and adults. I would see them write in cursive, and it looked really fancy. So I remember one night my mom was doing dishes in the kitchen and cleaning up after dinner, and I was sitting at the kitchen counter, and I had a piece of paper, and I scribbled on the piece of paper. So it kind of looked like, a scribble followed by a space, a scribble followed by a space, another scribble, and so on. And I remember I took the piece of paper and I said, "Mom, what does this say?" And she looked and she said, "It says nothing." I said, "Nothing?" I said, "How can it say nothing? I mean, it looks like cursive. It looks like what I see everybody do when they move a pen across a piece of paper. This is what this looks like to me. How can it be nothing?" So I went back to the drawing board. I did another scribble followed by a space, another scribble, space, scribble, space. I said, "Mom, what does this say?" And I can remember she goes, "Sweetie, look, you're going to learn how to read and write when you get to school, so don't worry about it." And I went, wow, bummer. So my point being is I was kind of imitating. I was trying to imitate what cursive looked like, but it wasn't cursive. It wasn't even close, right? And that's how for most folks, trying to play rhythm, they're trying to kind of imitate what rhythms are, but they're not really rhythms, right? So let me play for you the equivalent of what I'm talking about with regards to fake rhythms. I'm going to bring the ensemble in. I'm going to play some TTSLRs as I play All the Things You Are. Now, what are TTSLRs? Easy. TTSLRs are things that sound like rhythm. TTSLRs. This is what I often hear from beginning jazz improvisers when they are focusing on trying to produce melody long before they have a command of rhythms, right? So here we go. Here's one chorus of All the Things You Are, with me playing a lot of TTSLRs, things that sound like rhythm. Here we go. Check it out. Wow. You see? Fake rhythms. No one would be able to musically notate what I just played. There might be a few couple of notes in there that they might be able to notate, but overall, they would not be able to musically notate what I just played. I was trying to create an impression of what I think I hear when I listen to jazz pianists, right? It was like when I was a little boy. I was trying to create what I thought was cursive, right? I was trying to present a knockoff, a counterfeit jazz pianist, and hope that it would pass for the real deal. And let me tell you, it doesn't. It just does not. Now, let me play All the Things You Are again. And this time I'm going to use quarter note and eighth note rhythms only, applied to chord tones only, right? The root, the third, the fifth, and the seventh. So I'm going to try my very best to just stick to quarter notes and eighth notes using only chord tones, but I'm going to play real rhythms so you can hear the difference, all right? So let's bring the ensemble back in. Let's check this out. One chorus of All the Things You Are with real rhythms. Here we go. Wow. Hear the difference? I certainly hope you do. Now, let's step back. Let's just step back and look how we should practice applying chord tones to real rhythms. And let's begin with a single chord, like F minor 7, the very first chord of All the Things You Are, F minor 7. And let's play 4 quarter notes on the root only. Right? And then we'll move to the third, then we'll move to the fifth, and we'll move to the seventh, right? But we're going to play just 4 quarter notes on each note of the sound, the root, third, fifth, and seventh. We're going to do so in time with a good feel. Now, I know this may sound like a very simple, a very rudimental exercise to you, but I'm telling you, it's not easy. It's not as easy as you are thinking in your head right now, I promise you. To play 4 quarter notes on a single note, whether it's the root, the third, the fifth, or the seventh, with a solid sense of time and a great feel is not easy. In fact, I would bet that many of you listening right now would struggle with this exercise. So let me bring the ensemble back in. And let me demonstrate what I'm talking about, okay? So I'm going to play 4 quarter notes, moving from the root, then the third, then the fifth, then the seventh, on F minor 7, the very first chord of All the Things You Are, okay? So here we go. Let's check it out. If this is easy for you, congrats, you are on your way. If this is not easy for you, stay put and continue to practice playing 4 quarter notes applied to a single note of the sound, right? Just stay put and practice that exercise. Now, I'm going to add a pair of eighth notes to my real rhythm. By the way, 4 quarter notes, that's a real rhythm. But now I'm going to add a pair of eighth notes to my real rhythm on count or beat 4, right? So I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm placing a pair of eighth notes on count 4. Plus, I'm going to stretch my rhythm over 2 notes now instead of just 1. I'm going to use the root and the third. Again, I will explore various note sequences when applying the rhythm to see what I can develop when improvising. So let's bring the ensemble back in, have a little fun with this quarter eighth rhythm played using the root and third of the F minor sound. All right? Okay, here we go. Let's check it out. See, just adding a pair of eighth notes and stretching the rhythm over 2 notes instead of 1 makes a huge difference. In a real-life practice setting, I would then explore moving this quarter eighth pattern to the 3rd and 5th and to the 5th and 7th as well. But for the sake of time, I'm going to move on and stretch this very same rhythm over all 4 notes of the F minor sound, the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. I will shuffle the deck, so to speak, right? The order of the notes, once I get comfy with playing the rhythm in a sequential order from the root to the 7th. So once again, let's bring the ensemble back in and let's see how this sounds. Let's see what I can come up with when improvising utilizing 4 notes, same quarter note, eighth note pattern, but using 4 notes now instead. Okay, here we go. Let's check it out. I think you are seeing where this is going, right? Let me give you a little arithmetic to help you. Chord tones plus rhythm equal melody. Let me say that again. Chord tones plus rhythm equal melody. See? Exactly what I said earlier. If you are starting with trying to play melodies when improvising, then you are starting backward. You begin with gaining a command of chord tones for all 60 chords for the primary sounds of music, major, dominant, minor, half, diminished, and diminished. And then you add real rhythms to produce a melody. I would focus initially on various quarter note, eighth note rhythms before going any further, before getting any fancier. Check out the entire podcast year, the fourth season of the podcast. Check out that entire year where we thoroughly explored rhythms from whole notes to half notes to quarter notes to eighth notes to dotted rhythms, 16th notes, triplets, and much more. Once you have a command of rhythms and chord tones, you can add the scale tones. And once you have a command of the scale tones, you can begin incorporating non-scale tones, half-step approachments, neighboring tones, etc. But do not make the most common mistake of all, which is focusing on playing melodies before you have a command of the chord tones and rhythms. And when I say have a command of chord tones and rhythms, I mean conceptually, orally, and physically, right? Whew, that is a ton. Now, one more thing I want to circle back around and talk about the singing aspect. You have got to be singing these rhythms internally if you want your hands to respond and play them correctly, right? If nothing is going on upstairs, nothing's going to come out downstairs. The hands take dictation from the mind. So you have to be singing or grunting or moaning or groaning these melodies, these rhythms, if you hope to one day be playing melodies. Okay? All right, so now let's move on to mistake number 2. Mistake number 2, space. The beginning jazz pianist fills up all space. They don't stop playing. In other words, just way too many notes. All right, space is a very important aspect of improvisation. What you do not play is just as important as what you do play. So when practicing your chord tones, when practicing your rhythms, practice incorporating space as well. And you can do this a couple different ways. You can improvise for a measure, rest for a measure. Improvise for a measure, rest for a measure. Or improvise for 2 measures, rest for 2 measures, right? I like to call it rest and assess, where you play something, you have some silence, where you can assess what you just played, and then go at it again, right? You can actually build the rest into your rhythms. And so you can have, when I say quarter note, eighth note rhythms, you can have quarter rest and eighth rest as well. Again, I would refer you to season 4 of the podcast, where we spent the entire year doing a very thorough examination of common rhythms used in music, especially used in jazz. So space, the lack of space, is mistake number 2. Mistake number 3, absolutely no repetition. No repetition. In other words, I used to have a teacher that used to say, Bob, if what you said was worth saying the first time, it's worth repeating a second time. And if it's not worth repeating a second time, it probably wasn't worth saying the first time. So when you have a musical idea and you're improvising, you have a musical idea, it is okay to repeat that idea. I'm thinking of C Jam Blues right now, and that melody, that's then what happens? Repeat. And then what happens again? Wow. Billy Strayhorn certainly thought that repetition was a good idea. So I would encourage you to be aware of repeating, including repetition in your improvisation. The beginning improviser tends to think that repetition is somehow an admission of lack of creativity. And that is absolutely false thinking. It's not true at all. So, mistake number 3, repetition. So the big three, when it comes to the beginning jazz improviser, I think the big 3 mistakes. Number 1, the beginning improviser begins with trying to create melodies. Mistake number 2, no space, continuous motion, continuous movement, no breath. Mistake number 3, no repetition. Those 3 elements, if you can begin to control those 3 aspects of playing, you are well on your way. Okay, now, one last thing I'd like to do is I like to play one chorus of All the Things You Are. And guess what I'm going to try to do? I'm going to try to use chord tones, space. I'm going to focus on some repetition. So let's see if I can include all 3 of these into one chorus of All the Things You Are. And hopefully create a nice little improvised solo over the chord changes. So let's check it out. Here we go. Well, we've done it again. We've unpacked a ton of information in one very short and one very fast hour. If you are new to improvising, if you are new to jazz improvisation, just getting started, then I strongly recommend that you focus on the arithmetic that I presented earlier in this podcast. Chord tones plus rhythm equals melody. Commit to truly learning the 60 chords. 12 major, 12 dominant, 12 minor, 12 half diminished, 12 diminished, in root position and their 3 inverted shapes. Be able to spell them, see them, and of course play them. Likewise, commit to actively and consistently practicing rhythms. Begin with simple quarter, eighth note patterns like I demonstrated today. Move the eighth notes from count 4 to count 3 to count 2 to count 1. Be able to play the rhythms using one note in time. Once comfy with doing that, begin to stretch the rhythm over 2 notes, then 3 notes, and then 4 notes. In other words, be methodical. Be intentional. Be formulaic in your practice approach. Never forget, creativity springs from structure. Creativity springs from structure. And as always, always be patient. Developing mature, professional jazz piano skills takes a lot of time. Begin structuring your study and your practicing after the playing demonstrations that I modeled for you today in this podcast episode. And I guarantee it, you will begin to see, you will begin to feel and hear your progress. Well, I hope you have found this Jazz Piano Skills podcast lesson, the very first of the Jazz Piano Skills lecture series, exploring jazz improvisation practice mistakes to be insightful and, of course, to be very beneficial. Don't forget, if you are a Jazz Piano Skills Ensemble member, I'll see you online Thursday evening at the Jazz Piano Skills Masterclass. That's 8 p.m. Central Time to discuss this podcast episode lesson, exploring jazz improvisation practice mistakes in greater detail and to answer any questions that you may have about the study of jazz in general. Of course, you can reach me by phone, 972-380-8050. My extension here at the Dallas School of Music is 211. You can also reach me by email, drlawrence@jazzpianoskills.com. That's drlawrence@jazzpianoskills.com. Or you can use the nifty little SpeakPipe widget that is found throughout the Jazz Piano Skills website. Well, there's my cue. That's it for now. And until next week, enjoy jazz improvisation practice mistakes. And most of all, have fun as you discover, learn, and play jazz piano.